Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to the Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Hope you all had a great weekend as we gear up here on Monday. Final week heading into the holiday season. Important things that we're going to touch on today's podcast. Canopy Growth continues to do some restructuring, more deals that they were going to announce, as well the whole industry. It's down here today on a Monday. So what can we expect as this week progresses going into the holiday season? Our experts will share that insight. And as well, Reefer Madness is alive and well. There's some U.S. attorneys, former U.S. attorneys, that think cannabis should not be rescheduled. Why? Well, let's find out. And the important reason why you should watch this podcast. Let's welcome in TDR millennial entrepreneur and lead financial writer, Benjamin A. Smith and Anthony Varrell. Happy Monday, gents. How was the weekend?
It was good. It was good. Got some golf in. Saw the sun finally yesterday for the first time in 4 days. It's we had a crazy storm in Florida that now somehow has worked its way up to the Northeast with like crazy rain winds and wind for like 3 days straight. It was kind of wild.
Son, do you remember what that looks like, Ben? It's been probably a good 3-4 months before us Northerners have seen any kind of sun anytime soon, but one day we'll get that back, right?
I do. The sun tends to go down here at like 4:30 now.
So it gets crazy?
Super
That's
early.
Wild.
Yeah. But I mean, up north, obviously, places up north in Canada it goes down a lot sooner. So I can't complain. It's only, after Christmas, the winter solstice, it starts to, normalize. So I'm waiting for that to happen.
We turn the corner this Friday. The days start to get longer this Friday, December 22nd.
Yeah.
Got a long ways to go, but there's some hope. Santa Claus, a week from today. Can you guys believe it? As we head into the holiday season, stocks are down. We'll get into that a little bit, but I want to start things off. Interesting story that I brought up, as I said off the top with Reefer Madness. I think a lot of people, investors in this space, would look at this story as being ridiculous, as it appears that Anthony Reefer Madness is alive and well. Nearly 30 former U.S. attorneys sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland asking that cannabis not be rescheduled. So what's up with this story?
I mean, I think we're obviously going to get some opposition. Cannabis is getting a lot of positive conversations going on both sides of the aisle in the executive branch, at the DEA and at the HHS. So, I mean, opposition to this is going to be natural. But, I mean, they're not coming with fact. They're just coming at things that have already been debunked. There's no accepted current medical use. Jazz Pharma has Epidiolex. That's a cannabis derivative that was gone through the FDA. It is now backed by insurance, and it's a completely medically backed cannabis treatment that has scientific proof behind it. High potential for abuse. Sure, like any mind-altering substance, there is potential for abuse there. Show me how alcohol doesn't have a potential for abuse, and it's sold at every supermarket in this country and easily accessible, and more easily accessible than cannabis. So, I mean, that fact is also debunked. And then it lacks accepted safety under medical supervision. That, again, is something else that's been debunked. And really what I was surprised to see is the same old argument that the legal cannabis industry is actually helping the drug cartels flourish and the black market cartels flourish, which is completely debunked.
These stories are getting very draining.
I mean, the only leg that they had to stand on was when they were talking about the potency of the products that are currently in market from a THC standpoint, mostly concentrates, high range edibles, things like that. I think that's a valid argument. There's nothing really to fight back on there. But everything else was just complete conjecture and BS, coming from a lot of ex-attorney generals from Tennessee, Alabama, Washington, D.C. I'm going to go through actually later and profile the ages and the party affiliations with who they are.
Yeah,
I'd be willing to bet the average age is probably 65 and over of all of the attorney generals that are actually signing on to this.
I think you're bang on there. Ben, I see you shaking your head. It seems like we run into one of these stories at least once a month, don't we?
Yeah, I'm just like, why is anybody paying attention to former? I understand why they're high-profile attorney generals, but these are former attorney generals, right? So they shouldn't have this sort of influence, or it shouldn't, right? Like, there's already 38 medical and adult use states out there. So there are more attorney generals against this than states that have gone legal in some respect.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's ridiculous. Thank God that they're not the attorney generals now, and that we're changing over a new leaf, and
Yep.
their influence is waning, I think, and this is it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Happy holidays to everybody going out there. This is the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with Benjamin A. Smith, Anthony Varrell, Nicholas Pinto. Happy holidays and happy Monday to you. Good to see you. Matt Wilhelm. At this point, who knows when legislation will pass? Lots of, won't say the word, but you guys can see going on in the Senate right now, literally.
Schedule 3 is not legislation. I'm just going to point that out.
Good point.
That's why if Schedule 3 had to be legislated, I probably wouldn't even be sitting here talking about it, because I would say that it's probably never going to happen. The fact that it doesn't have to go through the legislative bodies of government is the saving grace of Schedule 3.
I've got to look at too. Somebody actually wrote me over the weekend saying that the people over at New Cannabis Ventures were saying that Schedule 3 won't happen. In fact, it'll probably be Schedule 2. I don't know why they said that, but I don't know if you guys got a chance to see or read any of that, but I will look into that a little bit later this week as to what the reasoning behind that is. But as we've stated before, Schedule 2 is definitely something we do not want.
I don't think Schedule 2 is a possibility.
No, I don't either.
With all due respect, New Cannabis Ventures lost its. I'm not going to go there. Just go to something else.
Yeah, we'll move on. All right, let's move on to Canopy Growth, who continues to restructure the company. The latest involves a completed sales agreement with a company called This Works, headquartered in London, England. The company is known for producing premium natural skincare products. Ben, walk us through on how this deal was structured.
Yeah, the Canopy Growth sold it to InSpirit Capital, which is an investment firm based in London. And as part of the completed sale agreement, This Works leadership, workforce, and intellectual property are now under the ownership of InSpirit Capital. So this looks like a complete divestiture. The transaction was valued at up to £9.3 million, or about 16 million Canadian, and it encompasses cash components as well. So I think overall, the takeaway for me, and it was exemplified by David Klein in the press release quote, was that Canopy Growth is trying to emphasize its commitment to North American offerings and trying to rein in some of its non-core assets into North American operations. And it just really follows the restructuring that the company's been doing with the latest, with BioSteel, divesting that. And it's just another component of right-sizing its business and to concentrate on its core competency, which is cannabis and cannabis products, and to bring things back to North America. So I think, it just follows in the restructuring mold, and I think it's another piece towards that. And I like the deal.
I know some companies might slow down this time of year, Anthony, but this company appears to be working around the clock to right the ship as we head into 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I love to see this. If I was Jim Cramer right now, I'd be hitting all my buttons with celebrating noises and applauding David Klein. I mean, strip out anything.
Mitch, come on, give me some sound effects for Anthony.
Strip out anything that's not a core asset. If it does not further, there we go. If it doesn't further the North American cannabis business, get it out of here.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see this. I'm glad to see David's remarks. This bodes well for Canopy, and this is just another step in the right direction following the BioSteel.
Jahu writes, and I think you've been thinking a lot here, Jahu, but can Canopy sell entire company to a private party like Twitter did? I see them selling everything for their value of $500 million, leaving investors with investment worth 50 cents a share. That's a lot to think about. I don't even know how to respond to that, but that's a lot of what ifs. But
I mean, sure they can.
Don't think they will.
I mean, we all could do a lot of things. Doesn't mean we're going to do them. I don't see that as even close to the realm of possibility. For what Canopy Growth is going to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in that scenario, what happens to the $600 million of debt that's held?
Yeah.
That's not even possible.
Yeah.
The acquiring company would have to take that on.
Which no one would.
At this point. So if you look at, unless you're like, a national CPG, like Constellation Brands or alcohol CPG, or just a regular consumer packaged good provider. But do you even want to do that now when there's no national infrastructure for supply chain. I don't see that happening right now.
This just in: national debt reaches new all-time high in the U.S. at over 33 trillion. It's a big number. Always love hearing from El Guapotron 4000. This goes back to our first headline about, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did. I'm sorry.
I did?
You did.
El Guapotron 4000. I do like that name. But anyways, the New England Journal of Medicine, the annual incidence of adults with cannabis-induced psychosis who come to medical attention is about 3 to 6 per 100,000. So that's what works out to be 0.003% to 0.006%. So it's funny how something so small definitely grabs headlines, but that's the day and age that we live in. But
that's a great point, because alcohol is way more than that. The incidence of addiction or whatever, it's got to be way more than that. So
you're never going to see somebody smoke a joint and go fight people or light someone's car on fire or break in somewhere or do crazy shit. Like, people that smoke weed don't do violent things. You want to get a bunch of people violent, give them a bottle of whiskey. I mean, just look at what happens on college campuses.
Yeah.
It's easy.
I'm still laughing at that El Guapotron 4000. But that's a hell of a name, that's for sure. On a more serious note, I think this is a interesting story and an important one. I think a lot of investors in this space should know. And this is important on so many levels. ATB Capital Markets received a mandate to sell the remaining assets of a Canadian hedge fund called Trainer Ridge Capital, which collapsed after the sudden death of its founder, Chris Callahan. This was a firm managing around $95 million as late as the end of September following the sudden and tragic death of Callahan. So, Anthony, you maybe want to explain a little bit more about this story and the correlation it has within the cannabis space?
Yeah, I mean, this is the same story that we broke a couple weeks back when we saw the forced selling that was going on in the cannabis. Fund manager suddenly died. Rumor is he took his life due to the performance of the fund. He owes apparently brokers. A lot of brokers are on the hook for a lot of money. And I mean, the fund's going to be liquidated and wound down. I mean, this could be a double-edged sword. It was an ARB fund, so I mean, he was long short. If they unwind a bunch of shorts in the U.S. cannabis space, it's a net positive. If they fire sale a bunch of equity positions in paper that's long, it's a net negative. To be determined. We'll find out here in the coming days and weeks. But it's good that it's being put to bed. So, I mean, it's not going to be something that's going to be sitting there. People are wondering what's going on with it.
Was this whole fund based in cannabis, or is this like
No, but they had heavy concentrations in cannabis, most notably U.S. cannabis.
Okay, so we don't know the actual percentage of what those weightings were.
No.
Okay. So it should be relatively minor, I think, with only, 95 million under management?
Yeah. I mean,
so
it's
with only 10
crazy.
or 20 million, it may not be too drastic.
Well, I mean, do the dollar cost weighting averages on a daily basis with some of these names. And I mean, 20 million is a big clip going into the market.
Who were some of the names, company names, like, I guess, could be or were affected by this somewhat? Do we know?
Nothing was disclosed.
Okay. Tragic, obviously lost, to say the least. But anyway,
yeah, that's terrible news. Gosh.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family. That's for sure. That's unfortunate. All right, this is Into the Wire. We outline all the biggest headlines in cannabis, psychedelics, and crypto here on Monday, December the 18th, 7 days before Christmas. Again, a reminder, we got a contest going on over at our Twitter handle, which is @Dales Report. Make sure all the contest details are involved. You want this white hoodie before Christmas, log on, we'll have all the details, and hopefully you're a winner. And make sure that you subscribe, and we'll make sure we get some hoodies out to you guys before Christmas. This is the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. Another reminder, too, please DM us on our Twitter account as to why you want to join us this upcoming Friday on our live stream podcast. We really want to have one of our viewers on just to get to know you and appreciate the support that you guys are providing. All right, let's now move to headline number 4. Next up, the state of Delaware and a new bill that was introduced this week where it would remove the requirement that patients have one of a designated set of qualifying conditions instead of allowing doctors to recommend marijuana for any condition that they believe could benefit. So, Ben, on paper, this could really impact the market, knowing that this pretty much opens up the door with any qualifying condition.
Yeah, and that's the big takeaway here, that it does open the door for other qualifying conditions to be brought forth, so that cannabis could be used as a medication for these conditions. For example, patients 65 or older could self-certify their need for medical cannabis, so they wouldn't necessarily have to go through the same protocols that they're going now. Again, that works towards the liberalization, normalization, or accessibility of the product. Also, for example, patients diagnosed with a terminal illness could also qualify for a card with an indefinite expiration date. So no need for constant renewals and things like that. And so, I mean, this is a good thing. I mean, obviously, when you expand access, and this is in front of adult use, which could go live next year as well. So this is really good. The legislature in Delaware is strongly a Democrat. Although the governor is not especially favored for cannabis, he did let the adult use measure sort of take effect without his signature. So I don't see any road hurdles to this. I think it could go through, especially with that Democratic legislature.
How does that adult use landscape look within the state of Delaware going into next year? Do you know?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I don't have the exact timeline on when that's going to take place, but the initiative did go through, and it's a smaller market, so it doesn't get the same attention as other markets like Ohio that went through. But it's going to be another state that goes legal, that goes adult use. So it's another notch in the peg, so to speak.
Anthony, you make a good point earlier about how when somebody smokes a joint, they don't want to go to fight somebody. Clint Eastwood, Marcus Smith writes, Clint Eastwood drank whiskey and killed off the entire town in the movie Unforgiven. Oh, boys, did he
see what whiskey does? Leads to mass deaths.
Yep. Guap, I'll call you Guap instead of El Guapotron 4000. Guap writes, Reefer Madness coming from a population of people who ingest cigs, booze, soda, fast food, processed food, Mickey D's, and opioids. Pretty much bang on with that. That's for sure.
I don't see any lies there. That seems like a lot of truth. That he's maybe we should have Guap on the podcast next Friday.
Well, he was voted, he says here, the third most handsome man in Santa Poca, 1842. This guy's hilarious. Anyways, all right. I think the last headline we want to bring up, and this is an interesting one. It was basically made headlines probably 4 or 5 weeks ago. It involved news from Hollywood as we switch now to the psychedelic space. And the late Matthew Perry, whose autopsy revealed that his cause of death was from acute effects of ketamine, but important to outline that the exact method of intake was unknown. It was later outlined that Perry was undergoing ketamine infusion therapy prior to his death, reportedly for depression and anxiety, But this is, as I said, important to outline the exact method. But as far as some of the intake and levels that were reported, what were some of the stuff that you read or came across, Anthony?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty convoluted and it's pretty sad from an optics perspective. You got to actually read into it and comprehend what you're reading. So, I mean, Matthew Perry was found to have 3,450 nanograms per milliliter in his bloodstream. A anesthetic dose from a medical definition is anywhere between 1,000 and 6,000 nanograms per milliliter of blood. So he was sitting right in the middle of what would be considered an anesthetic dose. So it couldn't have been, So it couldn't have been the ketamine infusion therapy, as it was validated. He had his last treatment a week and a half prior to him being deceased. Therefore, the half-life of ketamine is about 3 to 4 hours. So that concentration could not have been in his blood. Now, that's sad because for most people's understanding, he was sober and drug-free, and obviously this is pointing to recreational drug use. It was also found he also had an opioid. I think it was buprenorphine in his blood system, which is an opiate. So I mean that doesn't mix well with ketamine. But I think the cause of death they had said was, or he also had onset of heart disease found within him, as well as diabetes. So I mean he wasn't exactly the pillar of health. a recovering drug addict that was an actor for decades, that, I mean, he might have had a heart attack and been on ketamine, and that was the bandit, but we'll never really know. I mean, I don't think this really bodes negatively for psychedelic assisted therapies, as it wasn't a direct result. If he would have had the ketamine infusion that day and then went home and was found dead in his hot tub, sure, I think that there needs to be some investigating that goes on, and maybe there is some correlation that can be made between the two.
Yeah.
But the fact that there was such a big time lag, they're bringing up that he was using ketamine from a therapeutic standpoint, just in general, and it was over a week and a half had elapsed. It medically could not have been that contributed to his demise.
Yeah, I'm reading the report more. It revealed that a female friend of the actor said he was angry and mean in the weeks before his death because he had been taking testosterone shots. Eye-opening report, know that aside from a lethal amount of ketamine mixed with the opioid-like drug, and correct me if I'm wrong here pronouncing this, buprenorphine.
Yeah, that's what I said, buprenorphine.
Okay, sorry, which is to alleviate pain and help with addicted to opioids, but he was taking stuff obviously to lose weight, anti-diabetic medication, and nicotine lollipops, if you said, Anthony, and his assistant was saying that he was smoking as much as 2 packs of cigarettes a day, which,
I mean, testosterone shots can affect everything from your cholesterol to blood to cardiac function. So, I mean, that mixed with ketamine, mixed with other stuff, I'm sure he was on sure he was getting a ton of doctor supervision, but I mean, that sounds like a cocktail for something, especially someone that I think was mid 50s. I'm not a doctor, but that doesn't sound all too positive.
Well, I think there's been a lot of like mainstream headline stories regarding psychedelics. You talked about that pilot. Did you hear that story? That was about a month and a half ago. The co-pilot
on shrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely 100% a lot of misconception that goes on. But do you think stories like this, either one of you can answer this question, affects, the overall direction of this industry?
Not at all. Not at all.
I don't think
there's plenty of people that have died from ketamine use recreationally. I don't think it affects the psychedelic sector at all.
Yeah.
I think the one place that it potentially could affect, and we have come across these businesses being in our line of work, is the take-home ketamine clinics, like the ones that are under supervision, where you actually go to the clinic themselves. They're supervised. I don't think there's any risk in that business model or any scrutiny that they're going to receive. But we do know some business models where you can get ketamine actually delivered to your house in the mail, and then they'll have like videos, and they'll have support staff on the phone to help you through it. So something like that could potentially get more scrutiny if you're getting these drugs delivered to your house and you're actually ultimately taking them unsupervised. So something like that might be a little bit more within the
I think this industry is going to change so much in the next year or 2, 3 years. Much more data comes out, and the way this is going to be, the intake and how this is going to run. I think we look back at some of these things, and like what you just outlined, Ben, I think it's going to seem crazy that people are going to be taking stuff through a mail. It's just, this all got to be regulated in the proper way. I know ketamine is legalized right now, but if this industry is going to go, like, it's just, there's so much infrastructure that's still got to be put into play for it to really be recognized as a the proper biomedical industry, right?
Well, especially with the FDA, a couple months ago, we reported on this, that the FDA came down on ketamine and unlicensed and claims about
which they should, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm completely against at-home ketamine. I was pitched so many of those businesses to invest in, and I was like, not happening.
Yeah. And it's so it's tantalizing if you're a consumer, because the cost, especially if you don't have medical insurance, if you don't work for a big company and you can't get it covered, the cost is so much lower than going to a clinic and paying for yourself, that it's tempting a lot of people. And I don't know, apparently the stats, some of the stats are favorable, but you can twist those in any way that you want. But I would have apprehension about receiving any sort of, whether it's ketamine, psilocybin, or anything in the mail, and then self-administering based on a video or teleconferencing or things like that. Yeah, this should be definitely regulated and in a supervised setting.
Needless to say, I don't know. Seems crazy. How much did you take? You took like, what was that scene in, was it the movie Blow, where this guy said he can't feel his face or something like that?
That was Blow. That was Johnny Depp in Blow.
Slightly different, but
yeah, little bit different of a drug.
Just a tad.
Not that I would know.
Yeah.
But ketamine's pretty hardcore. If you take a lot of it, they don't use it in clubs for no reason, right? Like they don't call it the K-hole for no reason. So it's definitely can be very intense at high dose.
Guap writes, Donald Trump's blood is 25% Diet Coke, and he's going to live till he's 99. And judging by the way he's still motoring around, that would not surprise me whatsoever. I look at the fourth GOP debate last week, and it's crazy to think Ron DeSantis talking about a guy like, pushing 80 years old, but that motor he's got, man, oh man, he's never drank in his life. And I think that probably helps, but he looks like he's, for a guy who's 77, 78 years old, I cannot believe the energy that Donald Trump has.
Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah. We got anything else interesting? I think it'll wrap up into the wire for segment TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. Let's shift now to segment number 2, which is our daily movers. Whole sector in cannabis seems to be down right now, gents. So Ben, we'll start with you. We're looking at MSOs right now. What did you see today in the charts? And more importantly, maybe share with our viewers, like, what can we expect heading into the holiday season later this week?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to expect much. Obviously, news flow is lacking right now, and anything legislative or on the reform front is, pretty much not going to happen. We pretty much known that for a few days. So I think it's just it's going to be positioning into the new year. And right now, with the lack of news flow and with an industry that traditionally moves on that, it's not necessarily going to be beneficial for prices. And I think you saw that today, especially with the two headlines that came out with the fund that could have some forced selling, and then also the 30 former attorney generals, which is completely ridiculous. But that sort of gave for some perhaps negative optics, and then we just saw basically a drift down, and the bias was to the downside. So volumes on MSOs weren't that high, but the bias was down, and I think it's just going to be positioning until the end of the year, and then you might see some movement right at the end of December because tax loss ends 3 days before the end of the year, because it takes three days for those trades to clear, and then perhaps you'll see some movement again, hopefully to the upside.
Yeah, that is crazy to think of a story of Reefer Madness could act like retail investors.
That's not impacting this. That's not impacting the tape at all.
Don't think so?
No.
Why?
I mean, it's nothing we all haven't heard before. Yeah. If you're selling your cannabis stocks based on those headlines, you need to sell your stocks and go home because you don't fundamentally understand what you're investing in.
Yeah.
It's a letter from, like Ben said, none of them are even active U.S. attorneys. That's for us.
Well, obviously for somebody like you, it doesn't affect, but there's probably are some investors out there that were affected by it all, which seems crazy. And that's just my point, is that this retail investor space is very fickle right now, because how can you honestly look at former attorney general,
regardless, this is the worst time of the year to sit here and look at price action every day on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Like it's a dead trade right now until January.
Yeah.
Like, go enjoy the holidays, go get some work done, go do something. But sitting there staring at your cannabis stocks right now in the last 2 weeks of the year is going to drive you absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Like, there is literally no reason to sit there and watch what these things do.
There isn't.
For the next 2 weeks.
There isn't.
No.
And just to be clear, I don't mean it to be that there's a ton of overselling based on that news, but it could be more there was no reason to buy today, so the bias was to the downside. Right?
Yeah,
it's sort of like a buyer's
there's no
right? Like
zero reason.
Why buy at 660 when there's no motivation to buy? Things are drifting lower, so people don't initiate positions there, and the price action drifts down. So this was all low volume stuff, and Anthony's completely right.
Yeah, nobody with half a brain right now is buying stock. Like, even retail guys with cash. There's a lot of people that fundamentally do understand what they're investing in. No one's buying cannabis stocks right now. No one's buying stocks. Like, the market's just going to digest what it's going to digest the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start the new year, hopefully get what we think is going to happen. And then this thing's going to go for a ride. But no one's buying shit right now.
Yeah. And
like,
Boris,
it's not.
Boris even said that last week with the TSX listing. Like, we're not expecting anything as far as like any kind of jump right now. In fact, some of the shops, as I said on Friday, some of their analysts aren't really even covering this space right now. But this Wednesday, we're going to have on Jason Wild, chairman of Terracin, which would be an interesting podcast because he was in Germany last week. So I'm interested to hear how that trip went and what some of the sentiment was. But if you've got a $16, $17 stock that's trading at $2 and you're speaking to an institution that hasn't followed the space like we have, what's your case? Oh, rescheduling. No. Sure. Give us a call when that happens, right?
Yeah. And I mean, everybody that I know that manages money or has any kind of exposure to the financial industry, they're checked out right now for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Like, no business is getting done. No banking is getting done. No buying is getting done. Like, people are checked out. If you are going to sit there and watch it, you're going to drive yourself absolutely mad for the next 2 weeks. Because I'd be willing to bet that we're probably going to tick lower just gradually over the next couple of days and sessions.
Yeah.
And then start the year off on a new foot. Like,
however, keep your eye at the end of the year and when tax loss is done. It actually ends before the end of the year. So
it does move.
Keep your eye on a Friday, like the 29th, for example, when everything's done. Sometimes you'll see some pretty wild swings right at the end of the year.
When people
can file back in.
Marcus Smith writes, I closed the Charles Schwab window, signed out today. Don't watch it. And I think that's a lot of the things that you said, right?
And then there was this where was it? There was a comment up there that I saw that I wanted to say something about.
Anthony's right. I'm just going to keep DCA into MSOs to bring my cost average down. I'm in for the long haul. Right.
So this looks like a fake comment, to be honest. If you're real, then I apologize. And thank you very much for watching the show. But I mean, for you to say that things are depressing in cannabis, the only thing that's depressing is the price action. The fundamentals of all these businesses keep growing. The regulatory conversation keeps growing. Mm-hmm. Everyone's talking about cannabis that needs to be talking about cannabis. And if you need to get out and sell at a loss and preserve your capital, go right ahead. I mean, that's a big boy decision that you need to make yourself. Like, no one's going to sit here and feel bad, or no one's going to tell you what to do. But I mean, you should know what you're investing in, and to say that it's depressing couldn't be farther from the truth.
Well said. A reminder, all views on the Traded Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests and hosts as investment advice. And the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. And that is information that you shared, whether you want to take it or not. But pretty bang on when you think about the fundamentals in this space continue to grow, right?
However, there is some truth in that in terms of the growth story needs to rebound. I've talked about that. That's my I think the fundamentals are looking good, but we got to get that growth kicking back up again. And so some of that stuff that was promised 3 years ago by some CEOs' own admissions hasn't, the growth story didn't quite unfold. It took a pause. And I think it's going to come back. And I think when the regulations come in, and this is what we're playing for. This is what you want as an investor. It's sort of a depressed market because maybe some things didn't turn out last couple of years in terms of growth, and there's a few other issues. But this is what hopefully turns around 2024 with regulatory.
Skip Squellman, go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say the growth narrative is what's going on in Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio, hopefully Florida. In 2024, Maryland right now is growing at a steady pace. I mean, if we don't see growth now coming on into these earnings prints in 2024 from the last couple of months to quarters of activity, then there is cause for concern. Yeah, but Ben's right. I mean, the growth narrative needs to come back, and it needs to come back strongly.
Yeah, I'm excited for Florida too. I'm excited for
New York
for that decision.
Wholesale, yeah.
Skip Squellman writes, NLCP. Did I have another good day? Anthony Cognitius Company, New Lake.
NLCP, Refi, and Merrimed were the only three names on my screen that were cannabis names that were green. And I mean, I would expect to see continued buying in NLCP going into the end of the year, as their dividend date is on the 28th of December, and they've declared a 40-cent per share dividend, which is a nice dividend.
Wow. So I'm looking at the price now. It closed at $15.49, up 6.07%. So it's been doing quite well lately over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's a nice looking chart.
Yeah, it really is. Probably the best looking chart in cannabis right now.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention too to our audience is that we announced a couple weeks ago, but we're now into real estate, and our host Todd C. Slater. This is a gentleman that an entrepreneur that has basically built a $1.3 billion real estate portfolio. He did this all by himself. One time was the #1 ranked Remax real estate agent. In the middle of it all, he thought, why am I building Remax's brand and my own? But he has got a wealth of knowledge, information on how to get involved and started in real estate investment. It's a podcast that we push out every Sunday night. And one topic we had last night are realtors, their commissions that they basically make off of your deals. Are they worth it? But we had that post last night, got some good dialogue and feedback so far. But one thing that's a hot topic right there with cannabis right now is real estate, from both corporate and from residential, which I'm learning a lot, but I don't know if you guys got a chance to see any of the podcasts, but Todd is a wealth of knowledge, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a couple, and I mean, he's got one thing that a lot of people don't, and it's $1 billion portfolio. There's not a lot of people that can say that they've done that.
Yeah. Another thing too, my behind the scenes film shoot with the Cureleaf team last Thursday down at the TSX. We're going to be posting that on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So if you guys just want to see a behind the scenes, my interview with Boris walking down the street, I then got a chance to speak with the CEO, Matt Darren. That's going to be posted tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. So I have all the details. I know the interview we did last week with Boris on our site, YouTube channel, Twitter, StockTwits, Reddit. This performed very, very well. Boris is definitely a voice that many people stop and listen to.
Oh, yeah.
Now, as an aside, Shad, I was talking to a couple brokers who work in the industry over here in the Toronto area, and they're saying that they expect a very hot spring market or possibly fall market as the interest rate cycle has topped, and they expect interest rates to start declining by 3 or 4 cuts in 2024. So this could be a good time to brush up on your real estate knowledge if you get a chance, because the market there's a lot of pent up demand.
And with the Fed's announcement last week, you guys think, as you said last week, you think the small cap space will do well in 2024 as we head into an election. But is the real estate market still down in like Southern Florida, still red hot, Anthony?
Yeah, it's still buoyant. I mean, there was a article I was reading today that the California market is completely falling off a cliff. I mean, my neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale keeps going up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think real estate in Miami on the luxury side has taken a hit. I mean, granted, it's all proportional. I mean, I had a couple friends that bought $5-6 million houses that could sell them right now for 18 to 20. So, I mean, for those to correct a little bit, it doesn't really matter. I think the average rent in South Florida right now is actually going down, but it's skyrocketed. But no, the real estate value in Fort Lauderdale and the greater South Florida area is still pretty buoyant, to say the least.
How about 3 weeks ago at MJ Biz in Vegas? Vegas is the fastest growing city in the U.S. right now, and there's a ton of people that have moved to California. The locals there can't stand them, but that's just all part of everything changes over time. But Nevada's a hot state. Colorado remains hot. Texas, Florida, Raleigh, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia. These are all big states. And what do they all have in common? They're southern states. Everybody's moving south.
Yeah.
So anyways, gents, I appreciate the time. We'll check back in on Wednesday. And for all of you watching, again, appreciate it. Happy holidays. And make sure to check out our YouTube channel tomorrow as we have the latest from the behind the scenes with Cureleaf. And if you want to learn more about real estate, log on to and see the latest podcast, the simple podcast, Simply Real Estate with Todd C. Slater. That's also on our YouTube channel. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because